Welcome to OhSister, where I unpack my Mormon sister missionary journals 10 years later. Okie dokie. So, there are a lot of things happening in my mission, even just this week. A lot of topics I'm wanting to talk about, but this is one of the big weeks because this is the week that we get my new mission president, and there's like a big training and I get to meet him and his wife for the first time. And a while ago, I guess a few months ago now, I was just looking up some of the, I'm always kind of poking around different topics I think I want to talk about. I don't remember how I found out about it, but somehow I found out that somebody had leaked the old mission president handbook. And while I was reading about that, and that was super interesting, and I think I'm going to talk about that next week, I also discovered a leaked MTC, Missionary Training Center, new mission president training seminar. And I was like, hold your horses. What is this? Because I didn't even really know about it, right? And it turns out that there's like every year they have like an MTC that's like about a week long training experience for new mission presidents, and they go there with their wives. And it's like this whole big deal. And all the mission presidents who are, leaving and need to be replaced, whatever, the new ones get trained at this thing. And would you believe it? This document is from the training that my new mission president received. So you can actually, if you're curious about this and you want to go look, I'm going to link where all of the stuff I'm finding is, right? You can always go find this yourself. You can read for yourself the training manual that my mission president had when he was a new mission president, when he was getting trained, which totally blew my mind and was super crazy and awesome. So I am going to focus in on this new mission president training for today's focus. And I will pause here before I jump back into all that to say you are not wrong. Last week's episode did go, I finally hit the 2-hour mark, and I've been trying to keep it under 2 hours, but I've just decided, look, I'm just going to say what needs to be said, and if the episodes end up being so long, I'm not going to, if it's a topic that needs to be covered and I don't know if I'm going to cover it again, right? I'm just going to try to say everything when I have the chance to say it. So I guess heads up that the episodes may be longer than normal going forward. So with that, I wanted to acknowledge that so it's not unsaid. With that said, I'm going to go back into just an aspect of the training that I noticed. So, there are a lot of things I could talk about in this training, right? In this seminar, I should say. But there was one overall theme that has sort of been on my mind during this whole podcast project, and it was quite noticeable to me in this training, and that was just the sort of overall focus on like patriarchy as a core value of the church, and like not only like implicitly existing in the what is and what is not talked about, but also like explicitly actually saying like patriarchy is important and like men need to be in charge and like we need to prevent women from having leadership positions, right? So it happens there. It's I was seeing that in both lanes in this seminar. There's so much of just like the sort of understood, not even needing to be stated aspects of the way women are not talked about or the way women are talked about, especially the women who are married to these men. But then, you know, there's also specific instances of clearly stating how they don't want women to be in charge, right? So I'm going to talk about that. And then I'm going to discuss how this teaching, both the sort of under the stuff that's just kind of assumed to be how it should be, and then also the saying explicitly this is how it should be. I'm going to talk about one expert's view of how that is harmful to society. Okay. Wow, that's a really long disclaimer. That's a really long lead up to what I want to say. So let me just start with this. Okay, so there is a lot of stroking of the ego of the mission president in this seminar. So when I was reading through it, the language they use for the people who are here for the training is they always say mission president, and then they always say wives. So they don't say it's like the person who is called to be the mission president is not the couple. When they say mission presidency, that doesn't mean the man and the woman in the marriage. No, the mission presidency is the mission president is the man, and then he separately calls for counselors who help him, who are also men. So his wife is married to him, and she is there with him as just sort of like regularly being a wife and a helpmeet and supporter to him and his priesthood duties. But this training is not for her. Like, there's only one instance that I found of what is the duty of the mission president's wife in the mission scenario. And of course, there will be more of that in the mission president's handbook. This is not the whole mission president's handbook. But in this new training, where both, the couple goes together, they've both dropped everything. They've both left their whole old lives to go do this thing. And none of this training is for the women. None of it is for, here's what you're supposed to be doing. It's all for, here is what your husband is supposed to be doing. And you have to be here with him because he needs you with him always. And of course he loves you and wants you to follow him around. But like, this isn't for you, right? So that's what's going on. So here are just a few things that they say in this training. At least the things that are written down. Remember, there are all these talks that they don't have transcribed in the training. There's places for you to take notes if you get to listen to them, but we don't get to listen to them, right? But we have at least the things that were printed out. So this was very interesting, this instruction here. So I'm just going to read this to you and let you react to it, and then I'm going to share my thoughts as well. So they say, a mission president is a faithful disciple and witness of Jesus Christ. Be loyal to your wife and considerate of her. As you are true to your covenants, you will set an example of righteousness for your family, the district, and the community. Your counselors and the district presidency should be men of the same character. Okay. So there's this conflation of, I respect women and I think women deserve dignity because I don't cheat on my wife, and I thank her for cooking and cleaning and doing everything, right? Like, those are not the same. Those are not the same. And that's literally actually the bare minimum to being a good partner, is to like loving your partner, enjoying their company, being grateful for the way that they help you. Also, probably not expecting only that, like, there should be some back and forth with like the help, right? But it just really stood out to me that in this seminar for mission presidents, which is really a really important position in the church, they're making a point to tell the men that they should be loyal to their wife and considerate of her. And that just, all these, this whole rainbow of meanings I get from that. Also, kind of in line with that, to the mission presidents, they say that you should also focus on strengthening families. They say you should teach that the family is the most important organization in time and eternity. So when the church talks about the importance of the family, I've realized, at least in my opinion, that this is code for we have to find a way to make it seem not only palatable but like good and wholesome that we're encouraging male dominion over women. And so the way that we're going to do that, says the church, is what I think the church says, that the way that we're going to make this seem palatable and wholesome is we're going to say, oh, it's just about family. And we're not trying to say that like women are less than men. We're just saying that the family is separate from anything we can think of in the world, and God ordained families to be this way. God ordained men to rule and women to be the helpmeet. And so we're just gonna say the family is really important. And whenever anyone says, oh, well, what about equal rights for, like, literally, like, anything that would disrupt the patriarchal system, oh, we just say, oh, no, that's against our religion because family. But really, they just want to maintain the system of power, right? So going forward, there was this very strange moment where they're talking about records, finances, and properties. And this is within how mission presidents are supposed to deal with a district. But, so, in the context of, if you're a mission president in an area that the church is not super established or is not very big, you might be dealing with fewer members than normal. In like Utah, there might be less people available to fill all the callings that you normally need to have a fully functioning ward or stake. So here's how they respond to that. They say, they have a section called Uniformity and Adaptation. And it says, members of the church live in a wide variety of political, social, and economic conditions. Districts and branches also vary in size and leadership resources. These conditions may require local leaders to adapt some church programs. Such adaptations typically affect the auxiliaries, leadership meetings, and activity programs. To know which adaptations might be appropriate, leaders must first understand the doctrines, ordinances, and practices that are established by Scripture and the teachings of Latter-day Prophets and Apostles. These are to be uniform throughout the church. A discussion entitled Where Uniformity is Required is found in Chapter 17.1 of Handbook 2. Okay, so reading this, there are a lot of ways that this could go, but it stood out to me, the emphasis on literally, it literally says uniformity and adaptation. And they say there are places where adaptation might be necessary, but there are places where uniformity is required. And it's in an official church handbook. And they make it clear that in some ways you might have to adapt things, but you cannot change doctrines and ordinances and established practices. And that's code word for you can't change the way that, like, basically you can't change who has the priesthood. You can't change the gender role priesthood stuff. I am aware of, just through I was listening to a Mormon Stories interview, so I apologize, I don't even know who this is, but there was someone, one of the people who was doing an interview was talking about his experience being I think a bishop in California somewhere, and he was like a really cool guy, and he was annoyed by how the women were never up at the head of the meetings. Like, they always had men in charge up there, but never women. And he was like, that's really harmful. The women in my ward are telling me, like, it would make such a difference. California usually has some pretty cool progressive Mormons, right? So this bishop, well, when he was the bishop, he started having women who were the head of the women's programs simply sit at the head of the church meetings. They weren't doing anything different. They weren't even, like, saying that the women were presiding or anything. They were just having, at the regular sacrament meeting, the women who were in charge of the Relief Society program and the primary and young women's programs, they were also sitting up at the front of the meeting, where also the men who were in charge were. And he got in so much trouble. I think he got kicked out of, like, he got released from being a bishop because he wouldn't stop doing that. So that is what I think. That's what they're talking about when they say there are some places where uniformity is required, and, you know, if there's not enough young men to pass the sacrament and you have a lot of young women, tough. They cannot do it. You can't have women in leadership positions, right? Going along with the leadership needs to be male, and it has to be authorized. In a completely different section, this same point is continued. They say, so if you're a mission president and you're in a district and you're helping with the district leadership, one of your big things, they say, that is super important, they say, make the calling of full-time missionaries a high priority. As districts prepare to become stakes, returned missionaries are a vital resource in building strong priesthood leadership. Notice, at this point in time, there's like the same number of sisters and elders, but they don't say that it's vital, high priority to have lots and lots of full-time missionaries, because returned missionaries are a vital resource in building strong church leaders, or even building strong families. No, they say they're a vital resource in building strong priesthood leadership. So they're showing they're showing their hand here a bit, but it's a safe place to do it because it's literally in the upper level church training. So kind of everyone gets it at this point that it's nice when sisters go on missions, but the people who matter are the elders, because they're the ones who are going to go on to be elders quorum presidents, bishops, stake presidents, members of the core, members of the 70 area authorities, uh, stake patriarchs, you know, all these things. And if there are women who go on missions, awesome, because when they're married to these men, they know what's up and they can support the men better in their callings, right? That's what's going on. And then I'm going to jump forward to the sort of the notice or update section where they have updates that different mission presidents had gotten from 2007 to then present day 2015, right? So I wanted to talk about the update about having sister training leaders. So this is dated April 5th, 2013, and it's shown as like the official letterhead format, that the letter or email that would have been sent out to the various mission presidents at the time. So just a bit of context. The church changed the age of mission of when people were allowed to go on missions. At this point, it had previously been young men could go when they were 19 and women could go when they were 21. I think that might be off, but I think that's right. And then they just changed it to men could go when they were 18 and young women could go when they were 19. And actually, just barely, they just made a change so that now young women can also go when they're 18. And I should probably also talk about that, but anyway, the first time this age change happened in 2013, they're like, oh, now we're gonna have like half of the missionaries now are sisters, and it's becoming apparent that like sisters need to be able to go on splits, on companion exchanges. They need trainings, they need leaders, they need a way to go to mission conferences. So we're gonna implement sister training leaders. So they explain how they want to have mission leadership conferences, and they want to have the zone leaders and the assistants and the sister training leaders will go there, and they'll get trainings from the mission president, and then they'll go disperse it to their missionaries that they're in charge of. They also talk about what sister training leaders will do, what they'll be in charge of. They should be exemplary missionaries, etc., etc. I won't read all of that. What I will read is their clarification on what does this not mean, right? So they say, yes, we want you to implement having sister training leaders, but this doesn't change the important part. So they say, quote, the following aspects of mission organization will remain unchanged. Assistants to the mission president, zone leaders, and district leaders will continue to be elders. Baptismal interviews will continue to be conducted by zone and district leaders, aka men, and sister-only zones are not authorized, and sister-only districts are not encouraged. Unquote. So here they're just saying, you know, I talked about at the beginning of this episode the sort of implicit understandings of how men are more important, men have the priesthood. There's all of that sort of implicit stuff, but there's also points in this training where they explicitly say that women must not be given leadership positions, and this is one of those places, right? Even though the need for missionaries is so dire, and they need missionaries to have leadership experience so they can go on and lead in the church, it is not the sisters. And they're like, yes, we're making this change, but we need to be absolutely clear that this is only because we absolutely have to. And we cannot let women get it into their heads, and we can't let the men get it into their heads that women have inherent authority and that women have the innate ability to preside and lead and make decisions, etc. It's not authorized. Yeah. So, where am I going with this? I know that was a lot. I really want to make this point because I have been, in my personal life lately, really trying to understand what leads to like abuse and disempowerment, dehumanization situations, because there are a lot of things coming to light at this point in time about abusers, right? Like people who are just, if they can get away with it, exploitative, harmful, even flat out abusive to individuals over and over. But really the way that these situations happen is the overall system that enables this exploitation. It creates the person and the setting and the people who are vulnerable to exploitation, to abuse, etc. I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and reading this seminar and seeing how much of an emphasis that was put onto the sort of divine power and sacred, beautiful authority and responsibility of being a mission president, and just my keen awareness of how patriarchal the church is and how it's enshrined into the doctrine, and even the ways that I have been trying to get that out of the way I run my own marriage and my own relationships, the way that I see myself as inherently less than, and I self-sabotage all of my own aspirations if I can even dare to have them in the first place, because I just always feel like I need to put my family first and my husband first. I've been thinking about that a lot, and I remembered this really good book that I was introduced to a few years ago, and fortunately it's widely available online for free. So there's this book called Why Does He Do That? And it's by Lundy Bancroft. He is an expert in the field of sort of understanding men who are abusive. And I kind of extrapolate from this, and he also talks about this, but he's really good at understanding why specific people will be cruel. In his book, he focuses on why are so many men cruel to their intimate partners, but he also talks about how it's really a cultural phenomenon that makes this happen. It's not oh, here's this one evil wild card person. It's no, this is an outgrowth of the social conditioning that we have. So yeah, in the intro it says, I've been working with angry and controlling men for 15 years as a counselor, evaluator, and investigator, and have accumulated a wealth of knowledge from the 2,000 or more cases with which I have been involved. And of course, this is kind of an old book, and so he's got, I'm sure, even more to say, but I super recommend reading this book. It's really eye-opening. So I'm just going to read a few short clips, and then I'm going to read sort of a longer section. So from page 119 in the book, he says, a critical insight seeped into me from working with my first few dozen clients. An abuser almost never does anything that he himself considers morally unacceptable. He may hide what he does because he thinks other people would disagree with it, but he feels justified inside. In short, an abuser's core problem is that he has a distorted sense of right and wrong. So that's from page 119, and then jumping to page 128, I like this explanation. He says, about talking about abusers and kind of debunking that they're mentally unwell. He says, no, that's not true. He says, their value system is unhealthy, not their psychology. So what does this mean, right? It's not about people aren't abusive or exploitative because of their bad feelings or because of their histories of abuse, which he talks about too. It's not because they're psychologically unhealthy in some way. It's not because they're mentally unwell. There's all these reasons that we think of for why people, particularly men, why they would abuse or exploit their partners or women, right? So in chapter 13 of the book, he explains very well what this social conditioning is, what is it that creates, what fosters abusive men, what creates individuals that become abusive, why does this keep happening? And he has a section about religious beliefs. And here I would like you to remember the things that I just talked about just in the training for new mission presidents, right? And see if you can connect the dots that I'm connecting when I read this section about religious beliefs. Okay? So this is page 783. He says, religious beliefs have often condoned the abuse of women. The most influential religious scriptures in the world today explicitly instruct women to submit to male domination. Genesis, for example, includes the following passage. Unto the woman he said, I will greatly multiply thy sorrow and thy conception. In sorrow thou shalt bring forth children, and thy desire shall be to thy husband, and he shall rule over thee. And I will add in, plus all of the things that the church has put out over the years and continues to put out about the separate roles of men and women. They say you should love your wife, and they say you should help each other as equal partners, but in the family proclamation it does say ultimately women are primarily responsible for the nurture of their children, and men are responsible to provide and preside in righteousness, aka rule. That's how it should be. And I could go on and on. I have gone on and on already about how the church enshrines this male domination in marriage systems, right? So that's the example. So back to Bancroft's book. He says, I have had numerous clients over the years who explicitly rely on quotations from scripture to justify their abuse of their partners. Children who are raised in a faith tradition are commonly taught that the rules of their religion are the ultimate guide to right and wrong, superior even to civil law. A boy's early religious training can be formative in the development of his image of appropriate behaviors in intimate relationships, the status of women, and the entitlements of men. If the more destructive aspects of his religious background are the ones that are given the most emphasis in his family or community, some dangerous seeds may have been sown. Okay, that's from page 784. So basically, the church experience, right? Like literally, he says, children raised in the faith tradition are commonly taught that the rules of their religion are the ultimate guide to right and wrong, superior even to civil law. Later on, when I read a church statement about when gay marriage was legalized in the U.S., which also comes up in my journal this week, the church presidency says, like, yes, we should we believe in obeying and honoring the law, but also the church law is the highest law. So, like, yeah, we're not gonna let, just because it's legal now for people to engage in what we see as a sinful marriage, we're not gonna let them do it in our church, and it's still wrong. So it's super embedded into a Mormon person's experience from childhood to adulthood to their whole life, that the rules of their religion are the ultimate guide to right and wrong. Superior, definitely, to civil law. And I think just the way that things are emphasized or de-emphasized, the way that even the meeting is structured, the way that they write about men and women, the way that the responsibilities of men are praised and rewarded, and the sacrifices of women are expected and unmentioned, like, that is so reflective of the overall way that the church talks and teaches about the status of women and the entitlements of men. I could not have put it better myself, the phrase, the status of women and the entitlements of men. It's like, yeah, women are of such a low status, and men have so many entitlements. And I just want to finish by going back to that word Bancroft chose. He used, we're sowing dangerous seeds, right? And that reminded me of this choral piece that I just sang. And the text is, I'm going to read the sort of poetic version of the text, but the text is based on the words of a woman suffragist, Elizabeth Cady Stanton. So shout out to her. I know nothing about her besides the fact that she wrote, she said something cool that was then written into a nice poetic thing. The poetic version of what she said is by Richard Wiley Robson, and I got to briefly meet him and his wife who wrote the music, so that was really cool. But let me go ahead and read to you the text about the seeds that we sow and why it's so important what we're teaching ourselves and the future generations, and why it's so important what we believe and what we teach future people to believe. Okay, so here we go. We are sowing winter wheat. The coming spring will wake its sleep. And then, in time, when we are gone, other hands than ours will reap. Of course, in the context of the concert I sang this in, this was at the end of the concert, and it was meant to be a really inspiring, hopeful piece to remind us not only of our history of the countless people who have fought for increased equality and justice and goodness in the past, but to help us, feel like we can keep doing that ourselves. But I just can't help but see the sort of darker truth of this as well, that the church seems to be just as aware as the suffragists that if they can continue to sow their winter wheat of toxic patriarchy, then in time, the next generation will reap the seeds that were sown. And it turns out it's probably in your head because it's in mine, and it's a lot of work to uproot these wheats and tares. I've been having a great time working on this project, and it takes a lot of time every week to keep this up. If you have the desire and the means to support me financially, your donations are very helpful and very appreciated. Of course, I have a disclaimer that your donations will not bring salvation for you or anyone else. But there are links in the description where you can make a one-time donation, or you can sign up to join my monthly patrons to support this and my other creative work. Thank you! Let's get back to it. Monday, July 6th, 2014. Mission day 269. So I have this package-like letter from Leah, and I opened it, and it was the best letter ever. All caps. It also came with a magnet that says, "Yay, sisters," that I will probably keep forever. Sister Westrick was with us here in Spearfish today, while Sister Harris went to Bismarck for MLC with President and Sister Partridge. We took fun pictures and spent about 2.5 hours in Walmart. I almost felt like I was with Sister Crumpton and Sister Feist again. And then I drew a little winky face. My budgeting, in quotation marks, has been getting worse and worse. I spent $72 on MSF, Missionary Standard Funds, whatever, already. But I have resolved to be strong and just say no to eating out. So, all will be well. FHE was fun. We read Matthew 6 and got to have a brownie treat before we went home to have dinner. I made breakfast burritos. I don't think I ate any vegetables today, so I feel gross. All right. There we go. So just a few kind of disjunct things. I got a nice letter from my sister Leah. I guess it was a great letter, and she even sent a magnet, which was cute. I don't still have that magnet, sadly, but it's sweet. So I guess the big thing, President and Sister Partridge are here. So this is the first mention of my new mission president and his wife, and it was very exciting. Right. And there will be much more about them coming up, so I'll leave that for the future of this episode. I wanted to point out that I was kind of throwing shade at Sister Crompton and Sister Feist because it was, it was like P-Day, it was our Monday, so it was okay for us to go to Walmart, but we kind of spent the day just like taking pictures, and we went to Walmart for 2.5 hours, so I was like, oh man, this feels like when I was in the trio, and we would just kind of do whatever all the time. I'm being a little more honest about that in my journal at this point. I gotta point out that it is July 6th, so I have most of the month still to go, and I had already spent a large chunk of the money that I had allotted for food, so hopefully things work out. I guess we'll just see if I talk about money more in the month of July. Just sad. I've talked about it so much, how it was ridiculous that not only were we volunteering for the church, but we were also paying. Like, we were paying something like $400 a month for me to be out there, and the church was not, covering my expenses. Like, I had a small allowance for food, right? Just not enough, just ridiculous, very exploitative. I gotta say it every time. And then of course, there's just this mention of like not eating vegetables today and feeling gross. And I think some of that is like, there's just the hyper-focused, hyper-aware, unhealthily aware focus of like always needing to eat like super clean in quotes, like healthy all the time, right? But I also think it was just partially like, I know kind of what I need to eat regularly to like feel comfortable in my body and like not get like I feel sick or gross. So I think that's kind of part of what that was too. But I often am talking about not eating enough healthy food or eating too much sugar or whatever in my journals. So here it is again. Let's just keep going. Okay. Tuesday, July 7th, 2015, mission day 270. So, 2 experiences from the day I want to be certain to remember. First, for the last week or so, I've been thinking about foul language and that it doesn't really bother me. I guess because of Nora. Then in my studies this morning, I read all about how there was no contention after Jesus Christ came. 4th Nephi chapter 1. Which led me to 3rd Nephi 11, 29-30. Quote, "For verily, verily, I say unto you, he that hath the spirit of contention is not of me, but is of the devil, who is the father of contention. And he stirreth up the hearts of men to contend with anger one with another. Behold, this is not my doctrine, to stir up the hearts of men with anger one against another, but this is my doctrine, that such things should be done away." Unquote. I was thinking it might be cool for the Ikedas. Little did I know the lesson we had in store. We were just sitting down to read with Brent, us and Sister Westrick and Sydney, in the lobby when a large dog charged through the room and out the back door. His owner, a very upset, annoyed, outraged woman, charged right on after. She was cursing at whomever would leave the door open, venting and completely destroying the presence of the spirit. She was gone almost as quick as she came, and then there we all sat, looking back and forth at one another, speechless. After a moment, Sister Snow summed it up nicely. Quote, "My bubble popped." We quickly sang a hymn, offered a prayer, and began to read the scriptures just to be our healing balm. Smiley face. So yes, Heavenly Father, I understand now the difference language makes, and I am now determined to stand for all things virtuous, lovely, of good report, and praiseworthy. Second, I fasted and prayed that Sister Snow might receive help and greater understanding in knowing when we've been successful. Our appointment with Nora was canceled today. After our drawn-out visit with Hazel, I was too exhausted to go tracting, so I suggested we take our media or family history hour. While I was having a blast looking through sources on my new Ancestry account, Sister Snow found a neat talk about healing and hummingbirds to print out. At the end of the day, we met with Sydney, after the returning MLC crew picked up Sister Westrick in the Spearfish Chapel. We all sat down, and the spirit let me be quiet while Sister Snow read the story. I'm putting a copy in here to read. Afterwards, she said what really hit her was the line, quote, "The drop disappeared, even though the bird didn't move," unquote. She then explained that she has been struggling with feeling that she's wasting everyone's time, that she isn't making a difference. But in her dad's email yesterday, he reminded her that she's not here doing all of the Lord's work. Rather, he is accomplishing it all around us with his spirit, and we are just fortunate eyewitnesses. And this experience helped her understand that while our visits may not seem to make a difference in many people's lives, the light of Christ soaks into cracked hearts and feeds their spirits. Then I bore a second witness that no effort of love is ever wasted. It was and is so powerful for me when Sister Snow receives hope and happiness. I want so badly for her to not feel down. Smiley face. I also performed Book of Mormon surgery today. The sticky binding tape the library gave me last Monday only did half the job, so I finally gave in and put packing tape into my scriptures. I pray it'll hold together. Okay. Pretty big points here. So I guess somehow I realized it was pointed out to me perhaps by Nora or something. I don't remember the context, but and somehow it was pointed out to me that apparently I didn't feel too bothered when people had foul language, whatever, however I was interpreting that to be. And then, of course, I had this experience with an angry woman who came in to the space yelling, and I was like, oh, wow, I'm noticing I don't like foul language because it just, drives out the spirit, right? And I can understand where I was coming from. I understand how I made this connection, but now I'm like, wow, that was actually an inaccurate pairing of the concept of foul language with just someone being angry at all. So, of course, I made this connection though because it is actually kind of, these are one and the same, like in the church, right? What am I trying to say? What I'm trying to say is, at this point in my mission, I realized that foul language is the same as being contentious and being angry, and even in a healthy way expressing frustration or annoyance or anger, right? To me, those were all bad. Those are all foul language. Those are all contention. Those are all of the devil. And I'm just having it reinforced. It's an article of faith. If you don't know what that is, it's just like sort of like a church creed of belief. There's an article of faith that says we believe in all these things. If anything is virtuous, lovely, or of good report, or praiseworthy, we seek after these things. And it's just showing how much I'm getting this idea that it is possible to only be happy, lovely, virtuous, praiseworthy, of good report, never angry, never frustrated, never sad. I'm getting this really reinforced in my understanding of the world, in my understanding of myself, in the way that I think it is possible for me to show up in the world as a human. And it's really interesting to be reading this at this point because reading this was helpful with my therapeutic brainwashing, unprocessing therapy session last week, because I had just read about this, and I just read about how I was like, I was thinking on my mission that someone being understandably upset about this door being left open and her dog escaping, I, as a missionary, was like, oh, she is of the devil when she says she's angry and she comes in huffing and puffing, being upset. That's bad. That's not allowed. That's not okay. And I realized in therapy, I had this crazy aha moment where I was like, wait a second. If somebody teaches you that having anger at all or frustration at all is not allowed and is bad, that's actually setting you up to be exploited and to not recognize if you're being abused or exploited, and to tolerate bad treatment. Because if I'm not allowed to be angry or upset or frustrated, and if I need to always be happy, then if somebody who has higher authority than me, aka in this instance any man in the church, if he tells me I have to do something and it doesn't feel good, it feels like I don't want to do it, I have to do it because I'm not allowed to be angry. So any sort of anger, upset, fear, frustration, feelings, I'm not interpreting that as, oh, that's my natural boundary, I'm going to say no. No, instead, I was being taught that those are bad, and I need to just people please and repress any of my internal red flags, any of my internal boundary feelings, and instead just always be happy and praising and obedient, right? So that was really enlightening to read this. And then I also wanted to point out how worried I was about Sister Snow being happy and really wanting her to not feel down. I know I've already talked about this, and I can see how there is, that's not a totally bad instinct, right? It's not totally bad for me to want Sister Snow to feel hopeful and happy about the situation, and for her to feel like she's making a difference and she's doing with the world what she wants, she's doing with her life what she wants to do. Like, I see why I felt that way, but I can also see this sort of unhealthy responsibility that I was taking, and that I believed I had been given in my calling as her trainer, that I was believing it was possible for me to make a situation that she would always be happy and hopeful and always feel good, and it kind of felt like it was partially my fault if she wasn't having that experience. In reality, if she wasn't having that experience, it's probably because, one, we are human and we're just not always going to feel happy, hopeful, and fulfilled. That's just not how life works. But two, particularly when you're a missionary, there are so many things that need to be happening for you to be considered successful, and a lot of them are out of your control. So, like, are you baptizing people? Are you getting really high numbers of, like, all the lessons you're teaching, etc.? And a lot of that is dependent on where you are and who you're talking to. So we could work as hard as we could possibly work and still not be considered successful missionaries. So there's just, like, another layer of, it was really impossible for me to make it so that she always felt hopeful and happy, right? And then the last thing from this day I wanted to point out was the strange way that Sister Snow's dad was trying to comfort her. Because she'd been sharing that she was feeling down, she was feeling like she was wasting time and she was not making a difference. And I think what I would prefer her supportive father to have shared with her, I would have preferred a message that was something like, I'm sorry you're having a hard time. It can be really hard to be a missionary and be doing your best and be learning and having people. It's like, it's not up to you whether people listen to you and whether people want to join the church. But, like, I believe in you, like, I love you, I support you, and no matter what, like, you are successful in my eyes, and I just want to be here for you and support you in whatever you want to do with life, I would prefer that kind of message, but the message that she got from her dad, who was doing his best to be supportive, and from a Mormon perspective, I can see how this is supportive. So what he said is, don't take too much pressure on yourself, he says. He says, remember, you're not here doing all of the work of the Lord. You are just here as, like, a witness. So you're going around doing your thing, and even if it doesn't seem like you're making a difference, just your presence and your spiritual aura is going to soak into the hearts of the downtrodden that you're around, and they will just be lifted up just having been in your Holy Ghost presence. But really, it's very strange to me that he's like, remember, you're not the one doing the work. You just are watching. But, like, literally, she is the one doing the work, actually. Like, I'm like, this seems like it's kind of downplaying the struggle of being a missionary and saying, well, don't worry about it because it's just gonna work. It's just, I feel like it didn't address the core emotional issue and just kind of like sidestepping and like, oh, well, don't feel like you're wasting your time because you're not. You're not wasting your time. But like, no, that's not the problem. That, like, just, it's not about the nail. It's about the feelings. So be there with the feelings. Don't try to solve the feelings. Yeah, that's what I wish. Oh well. Wednesday, July 8th, 2015. And then I wrote in parentheses, 7 plus 8 equals 15. I guess because July is the 7th month. So, anyway. Mission day 271. We had a really good day. I've been more mellow, contemplative, and serious. But Sister Snow's been balancing it out well. Smiley face. We saw Heidi at her apartment for the first time. As expected, it was clean, cute, and classy. Hardwood floors, tall windows, and simple country decoration, all with the overall touch of the 1800s. Hot Springs is amazing. That aside, we had a nice time reading from Alma 34, 17 to 41, and Mosiah 24, 12 to 15. She opened up as we asked her about what patience means to her. I'm so glad we went. Smiley face. For 12 week, we ended up doing more of follow-up. Following, I wrote just F, the letter F, and then an up arrow. Following up on our transfer vision, I think is what that means. Okay, for 12 week, we ended up doing more of following up on our transfer vision. But I think it was what we needed. I'm now accountable to tell Sister Snow when I feel we're not following the spirit or the rules. And she has to have us play the grateful game when she starts to feel down at herself. President Stockman was not at dinner today. He's on a motorcycle adventure in Wyoming for the weekend. Sister Stockman was wishing he would let her know where he was on the road, ... Sister Snow got her package and I got a cute notebook and card. Her family is way thoughtful. Alright, there are many things I want to talk about later, so from this day I'm just going to point out that we made ourselves a vision for the transfer, which included goals to make us, I think, a more connected companionship. And of course, the communication relationship goals we had were not the best. And they were sort of just very emblematic of the sort of struggles we were going through and the semi-useful but not really tools that we had to try to help ourselves with our struggles. So my struggle was I was getting really neurotic and compulsive and anxious about not feeling like I was following I felt like I always needed to be following the spirit, and I was super worried about being disobedient. So that meant that I had that constant worry, and then I usually was also feeling resentment that my companion was not also being super strict and super obedient to the spirit, because I just had this worry about myself, and I was probably projecting that they were also not following everything. But even, maybe they weren't, right? So my solution for that was, I'm just going to tell Sister Snow, hey, you're not we need to do this better. Like, instead of getting behind the sort of unhealthy, compulsive neuroticism that's been amping up and up and up, my goal is to just transfer that to Sister Snow and tell her more often to be more obedient and to make sure, double check that she's following the Spirit. And then she had been struggling with, feeling like things aren't going well, feeling sad, feeling frustrated at being a missionary and frustrated and worried that things aren't not going well. So her strategy, that the best tool that we had for her was, when she starts to feel down, let's ignore it, and she says, let's play the grateful game. And of course, having a practice of regularly being grateful is, I think psychologically studies have shown that that's generally a good thing. However, my understanding of if you are in a situation like we were in, if you are an exploited young missionary, then there are going to be lots of times when you're just going to feel bad because it's just a crappy situation a lot of the time. And if you tell yourself you're not even allowed to feel bad and it's bad if you feel bad, and so you're just going to try to push that away and you're just going to play the grateful game and try to just be grateful, just smile that frown away, that's not healthy and it's not actually going to help. It may distract you for a little bit, but there's that wise saying, that which we resist persists. So if you continue to resist that you're feeling down about something and you just push it off and push it off and push it off, it's not going to be resolved and it's just going to stay with you and grow and grow and grow and make you feel generally more and more and more depressed. So, two young women with two pretty big problems, doing the best we could to solve them, but really we needed different solutions. Okay. Thursday, July 9th, 2015, Mission Day 272. I feel just all good, smiley face. It's so great being Sister Snow's companion. We had weekly planning today and we're all done, besides the progress records. We had even planned out 15-minute break ideas. Smiley face. Not to be narcissistic, but Sister Snow said something in comp inventory that really helped me. I've noticed these last transfers that Sister Snow's spiritual journey brings a story of great converting power. And I usually just end up sitting there with a testimony that I testify that what my companion said is true. Not that I wish I'd gone off the beaten path, but I did notice a difference in our abilities to connect with and understand less actives. Sister Snow, guided by the Spirit, I'd say, said that, quote, "You don't need to go through all those trials because you teach by example." Unquote. That was good to hear. We had an awesome lesson with Bonnie. We read an article from a recent ensign on the Savior's respect for women. She actually is friends with Byron and his mom and went with them to the carnival last week. She's the family that helped his dad get a job out here. We are already making plans to use that connection, ... Big smiley face. All right. Things to point out. It was interesting to see myself saying, I don't want to be narcissistic, but here's this nice thing that happened. That was really helpful. And it's, one thing is interesting to me about this. So when I still probably am, but especially when I was younger, I was very perfectionistic about feeling like I always needed to spell words correctly. But of course, when I was on my mission, if I wasn't sure how to spell something, it was hard to immediately look up. So sometimes in my journal, there's a word that I just didn't use a lot before my mission, so I'm like having a hard time remembering the correct spelling. And this is one of those words. So I spelt, the spelling was off. And when this happens, when I'm reading back through my journal, sometimes I'm just like writing fast or whatever, but like sometimes it's because there's a word that I'm just less familiar with. And interesting that narcissism is one of the words. And it's a bit of a preamble that I'm giving you about this spelling stuff. But I want to get into it. That's just because I had this concept that just any sort of taking up space at all was automatically like selfish and narcissistic. And the thing that I write afterwards is just like one small kind of nice thing someone said about me, someone close said about me. And I was so worried that in writing it down that I was like getting a big head, getting a big ego. So I was like, okay, I'm going to write this nice thing that happened in my journal, but lest I get a big ego or lest people who read this are like, wow, this person's so narcissistic. Like, she's so full of herself. Like, I felt like I needed to make it clear that I was like, no, I still know. Like, I'm not perfect, and like, all glory to God, and like, it's not all about me, like I of course I still see myself as like the one of the, lowly and worthless. And then, what I ended up saying was just how I had been feeling a little bit insecure about feeling like I was kind of sheltered, maybe feeling like I had a hard time connecting with people who had more of a journey through their faith and their connection with Mormonism than I did, because I had just been trying. I'd always like believed in it, and I was always just as much of a straight arrow as I could be. Like, pun intended, like always my whole life I was like, this is real and I'm just gonna do my best to like hold to the iron rod and try to always do everything right. And that's not everybody's experience. So when we talked with people who were struggling with or they would say that they were struggling with their faith, they would say that it wasn't always so black and white for them. I could see that when I didn't relate with these people who had this experience as well as Sister Snow. So yeah, just like I had that insecurity. And I just got this moment of validation, and it was something I maybe I had shared with Sister Snow that I was insecure about it, but the way I wrote it down was that I wrote that Sister Snow was guided by the Spirit, which is implying I had not shared with her that I was insecure about this. So she just was like, yeah, you teach by example. Like, Sister Snow, I've had to like fight through the weeds a little bit more, and I have to teach through experience, but you show people like what it's like to just live this way your life, like to just kind of always be doing it, always be on the gospel path, as I would have said. And of course I won't even get into like all the other aspects of this this way of thinking, right? But it just stood out to me how worried I was of seeming to others and to myself like stuck up, selfish, narcissistic for just having this validation, right? That was interesting to me. Um, Also, two more things from this day. We had a lesson with Bonnie, who I think she was LDS, but she was not active, or she didn't go all the time. She wasn't like crossing all the dots and T's, right, that you're supposed to, or at least that, we believed and taught that you're supposed to anyway. And I didn't say anything about it past this. I just said we read an article from a recent ensign on the Savior's respect for women. And I actually, I was able to find this article. So I'm not going to read through it all here right now, but I'm going to link it in the description if you want to read it yourself. But what stood out to me was how we were talking with Bonnie, she was either a teenager or, I think in her early 20s. I can't remember. But I don't know if it was something that we had openly talked about with her, or something we just kind of sensed that, like, oh, she's a young woman, young adult woman, or a teen, in the church, and she's not super involved, and like, oh, maybe we should talk to her about how the church actually loves women, and like Jesus loves women. I think I would not consider myself any biblical scholar. I think I've heard people who are scholars say that biblical Jesus is a pretty progressive person about women. Sadly, even in our time now. But what I can say is that is, in my opinion, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints does not have respect for women the way that we were trying to imply that the church did by saying, well, that Jesus has respect for women and we're Jesus' church, so you should come be more involved in church because the church respects you. Didn't. But yeah, I had to point that out. And then the last thing is how we had been working with Byron, trying to teach him and convince him to get baptized, and it turns out Bonnie was friends with Byron. And I don't remember if that's how we even found Byron or what, but we were talking with her, and it turned out that she was like helping their family out. She like somehow helped his dad get a job or something. And I actually wrote out, we are already making plans to use that connection, ... big giant smiley face. Like, obviously clearly stating like, oh great, here's a relationship we can use to manipulate this guy and his family, get this kid to know that Mormons are good and he should join the church because look, they're already friends with with a good Mormon girl. Like, just saying it straight out. I thought that was interesting. Yeah, and we were definitely taught to do that, right? But let's keep going. Friday, July 10th, 2015, mission day 273. I just feel like I need to shake today off and try again tomorrow. We started out well. Read Preach My Gospel with Rebecca Davis, had lunch, read Elder Birch with Sister Cowles, had district meeting, complete with a belated funfetti birthday cake for myself from the elders in Pine Ridge, met with Pearl, and then came back to finish the progress record. The Rosenbergs were to feed us dinner at 6 and do a lesson with Krista at 7. Of course, dinner ended up being delayed to 7:30, and we got back at 9 without having done a lesson with Krista. Although we have a set appointment for one tomorrow. Being there for 3 hours was not fun. ... I've been thinking about turning 20, and I used to be sad about it, but I'm feeling at peace with not being a teenager anymore. It's kind of like opening your mission call. You know it'll be a change, but it'll be a good one. All right, let's talk about it. Or I guess I will talk in an echo chamber about it and you will listen. Side note, it is becoming increasingly strange to me to have a one-sided discussion on this topic for so long that it feels doing this podcast where I'm reading through my own journals and then like talking about what my journals mean and how I feel about it now. It feels like I'm in a weird echo chamber, one-sided conversation. It's very interesting. I don't know if anyone else has the experience of doing like a long-term project where you talk just by yourself on one topic for a long time, but it's a strange experience, I can say, compared to my normal life. But anyway, that aside, let's get back to the journal stuff. So I wanted to point out how having kind of things get derailed at the end of the day just completely wrecked everything. And I feel like I've said this so many times, but I'm going to say it again because it comes up again. So I've got this sense that things need to be always following the rules and always perfect in the way that I could achieve perfect, which was, well, I can't get perfect results that are outside of my control, but I can perfectly follow the rules and do stuff that is within my control. You know, like I can't be perfect. I can't be a perfect missionary in the sense of getting dozens and dozens of people baptized, but I can be a perfect missionary in that I can completely perfectly follow the White Handbook. Like that is within my control. That's how I felt. And so anytime something bad happened with our schedule, or I ended up not being able to follow some of the White Handbook rules because of external or internal stuff, I would feel so guilty and so frustrated, and it felt like everything was just off, right? So I read through like a pretty packed schedule, right? And it was a lot of the different things that our mission presidency had been telling us to focus on. It was all the Preach My Gospel missionary kind of stuff. We were working with a member, helping her get ready for her mission. We were working with a less active member. We went to one of our important meetings. We met with another less active sister. And then just our dinner plans kind of got messed up. And it wasn't even our fault. It was just, there were some members who they got delayed for like an hour and a half, and then we ended up just eating dinner with them, and they were probably just feeling kind of chatty, and you know, they didn't want to like push through and like, okay, well now let's do the lesson today. They had a little bit more of like big picture, let's just do dinner now since everything's behind and we can do the lesson on another day. But I couldn't see with that big picture, really, or I mean I could, I wrote it down, but also I was like, it doesn't matter, like, if we try to fix it tomorrow, what matters is we messed up today, and like today, I wasted 3 hours, you know, and I would get really quite resentful when members would be a little lackadaisical about scheduling, whether due to stuff outside of their control, like maybe they got back from work late, something about their life got them held up, or they just didn't want to be as strict about missionary schedules as we were told we needed to be. But I would get very resentful with members who were more relaxed, lackadaisical, whatever, about schedules, because I knew how important it was to be punctual and follow all the rules. And I could see that there were members who were like, oh, it's okay, like, we can just hang out for today, and, like, that's important too, and we want you to, like, have a sort of normal human relationship with the person you're teaching, or even just with us. Like, we want you to just be around our kids and be a good influence on them. We don't have to push so hard to always make it fit within the hour and, like, have it all be about scriptures the whole time. And I could see where they were coming from, but I knew that that was wrong because we were told specifically that that was wrong. But it was like, it felt inappropriate to, like, really push back on that, because usually these members were the ones who were really involved with missionary work, and it was like, well, we don't want to burn bridges with them, like, we need them. And so it just would put missionaries, at least me, I felt like I was in a pickle because I couldn't follow the rules the way that I was expected to, while also keeping these people involved with the local missionaries. So it's just my perception of it was that the members who dealt with missionaries this way, the members thought it was fun to hang out and be less productive than we wanted. But for me, it was not fun. It was just stressful and upsetting the whole time. Yeah. And while I can now kind of look back on that kind of situation and see how it's, you know, maybe a little more like there is some, I can see that there was some wisdom in going a little bit slower maybe, or, you know, like not always being really intense and extreme all the time. I can also see that there was this lack of me being able to communicate with people when I was upset, or I felt like I had a boundary that was being crossed. You know, I basically, I was quite set up for being in relationships with people that I would get resentment and frustration with them about the way that they were disrespecting my time and disrespecting my priorities and my purpose as, you know, as I was trying to have it. And I didn't feel like I could talk to them about it. I didn't feel like I should talk to them about it. So even though I can now see that the situation was, you know, it was more complicated than how it felt, I do still, like, I can see why, like, I still think my frustration, like, was valid, right? And I wish that I had been given more tools for, like, how to address these kind of situations, rather than just being told, this is how it is supposed to be, and if it doesn't work out, God's not going to bless you and you're going to be a non-successful missionary. Like, I wish that part of our training had been like, okay, we're expecting you to follow all these rules, and, like, here's what you should do to, like, have a normal human adult conversation with people who may want to do things differently. And, like, hey, like, we love you guys. We appreciate that you do so much help with our missionary work. We want to keep that relationship with you. And we as missionaries, it's really important to us to have it, to, like, to follow the schedule, the rules. So, like, is there a way we can, like, make this happen? Right. We were never taught how to have that kind of conversation. And that would have been so beneficial for all of the, like, neurotic, compulsive religious guilt that I was constantly getting set up for with the mission rules. So I wish that could have been my experience, but of course it was not. And then just the last thing for this day is how I was reflecting. I was taking a minute to reflect. Wow, yay. About the end of, I was like, man, I'm not a teenager anymore. I'm 20, whoa, I'm growing up. And I was a little bit honest. That I was like, it's been a little, sad sometimes. But I was like, well, I'm starting to feel at peace with it. And I guess I can't really speak to where was I emotionally at that point. I was just struck by the analogy that I picked. Because I was like, I was trying to figure out how could I explain what I was feeling and how my acceptance of this change, this inevitable change of aging, how do I get that across page? How do I get people to understand what I'm trying to say? And of course, the most I had to draw on at this point, where I was, months into my mission. Well, I think I was 7 months in at this point, or even more, was a lot of just missionary stuff. So I was like, oh yeah, having something that I'm a little bit sad about, but then feeling at peace with, it's like getting my mission call, because it's scary and everything's going to change, but you feel like it'll be a good change. And that just stood out to me because I still remember my mission call, and I thought it was strange I thought it was telling that I picked the experience of opening my mission call with this emotional landscape I was in, because I was excited and I had faith that it was going to be the right thing. But there was some sadness there too, and I don't think I really made that connection when I wrote this down. I wouldn't have purposefully connected opening my mission call with sadness, but I did in my journal entry, because I wrote that with turning 20 and not being a teenager anymore, I used to be sad about it, but now I'm feeling at peace. And then to describe that, I was like, it was like opening my mission call. There's some sadness there. Interesting, right? Okay. Saturday, July 1st, 2015. Mission day 274. We met with Krista at the Rosenbergs this morning. She'd read the restoration pamphlet and had 2 questions/concerns. She believed that we're not saved just once we're baptized. So we showed her 2 Nephi 31, 19-20. And then she doesn't like being forced into faith. So we used 2 Nephi 2 and talked about agency. Then we ended up pulling out the gospel pamphlet, hearing her explain faith and repentance perfectly, and then we invited her to be baptized on August 8th. She doesn't even understand the message of the restoration yet, but she said she'd do it! ! And Sister Rosenberg stepped in and offered to help and study the Book of Mormon together daily. The lesson was unlike anything we would ever plan, but we answered her questions and she was ready. I've seen that basically when a person is prepared for baptism, no matter how crazy the teaching can get, it'll work out. We saw her later today when we were helping Sister Rosenberg practice the tenor line on A Poor Wayfaring Man of Grief. The Relief Society will be singing all 7 verses tomorrow for sacrament meeting. We had scheduled to do a church tour for Byron today, but then we didn't think he could, so we gave Sister Rosenberg a ride to his home, and then he was ready for a tour, and we all felt really bad. But we'll just see him at church tomorrow. Smiley face. We're going to branch missionary coordination in Spearfish, then sacrament in Custer, then back to Spearfish for sacrament meeting again. We are nuts. After singing with Sister Rosenberg, Sister Snow and I went back to the apartment, changed into our service clothes, and found our way to the animal sanctuary in Pine Ridge. The elders had been telling us they could really use our help there, and Sister Snow wanted to look at the animals. And apparently we had permission to go, even though it's not in our area. So we went, smiley face. And then it was crazy. The elders, they just run around doing stuff on their own there. At one point, they were going to take us on a tour, but we footed our way out. And as Sister Snow put it, quote, Elder Bueller was alone with a woman in the bungalow, unquote. We laughed and freaked out together, and Sister Snow kept saying, danger, danger, that her hanging out with elders was like a crack addict hanging out around cocaine. We decided we wouldn't go back, and then we read Lock Your Heart, and prayed, and decided to call the elders and suggest they rethink that service place, since it goes against all the white handbook points. I felt so out of place and ridiculous, I ended up making Sister Snow talk on the phone, while I delivered positive fluff on the top and bottom. Sigh. Communicating is still scary some. But hey, it's over, and tomorrow is Sunday in Spearfish, so that's all I need to get back to great. Smiley face. Oh boy. I'll talk about that, but I just first wanted to briefly explain what happened with Byron, because I don't think it was very clear the way that I wrote it down. So we were supposed to do a church tour with Byron. That was one of the activities that was recommended. I think it's in Preach My Gospel, but it was also in the pamphlets they had for us. So I don't think I've really talked about the pamphlets either. So okay, so we had the specific order of lessons, and of course you could do them out of order, but it was generally restoration, gospel, plan of salvation, word of wisdom. I can't remember all the lessons, but there were a few main lessons, and they mostly had official pamphlets that went with the lessons. And I think in the back of the pamphlets that it says do a church tour, and then sometimes it was more pushed for us to do than other times, but generally we tried to get new new investigators to come do a tour of the church after we started meeting with them, just to help familiarize them with the building and be so if when you come to church the first time, this is where it is. We'll show you this is where the first meeting is, then you'll go here for this meeting and this here for this meeting. So it's supposed to be a kind of a soft intro and get them used to the building and stuff. So we had that plan to do with Byron, but for some reason, I guess we didn't think he was gonna be able to do that. So we had Sister Rosenberg with us. So instead, we went with her to Byron's house. But then I think it ended up that we were there, but he was at the church waiting for us for the tour. So that's why we felt bad, was because there was some miscommunication, and he was at the church ready for the tour, and it would have been locked, right? Because LDS churches aren't open during the week. It's just on when there's a specific event and there's someone from the church there with a key. So he would have been locked out at the church waiting for us, and yeah, that's not a good look, right? Also, I wanted to point out that we gave Sister Rosenberg a ride to his home, and there also have been times when we've been giving Sydney rides, and this was one of the ways that we were. I think that when I was in what I had referred to on my mission as the Trunky Trio, when I was with Sister Feist and Sister Crompton, this is one of the ways that they kind of enforced, like, oh, this is a rule that we just have to bend in this area, and I felt bad about it, but at this point, I was the senior companion, I was doing the same thing, so I felt bad about it, but I was still doing it, so a little hypocrisy there. Anyway, we were absolutely forbidden from driving members in our car. We were not supposed to do that under any circumstances, but in this area, we often made exceptions to the rule, and I think in my next area that this was one of the ways that I was like, okay, I can't do this anymore. I'm gonna go in with my next companion and be like, look, we just absolutely can't break this rule. We can't break any of the rules, and if people are used to this, like, sorry, we just can't do it anymore. So, this is sort of the evolution of, I think, if I remember correctly, and I'm pretty sure I do, we're gonna see me have some really big sticking points about giving people rides in my next area. So just giving you a heads up about that. This is kind of where that very extreme hard rule about that, like, this is kind of where that is coming from, right? So, but mostly this day, I gotta point out the experience that Sister Snow and I had going to the elders' animal sanctuary. So, just in general, at this point on my mission, they were starting to really crack down on, like, regular service projects for missionaries, especially missionaries in our mission, from what I remember. They were like, okay, yeah, it's good to do service, but you don't want to be doing, like, you don't want to be giving service somewhere where they want, like, a really long regular commitment for, like, future missionaries. Like, that's not really the purpose of the service you're giving. If you're doing service hours, it should be in a way that's going to soften people's hearts and make them want to join the church, and it shouldn't be just for, like, a fun like, weekly getting away from missionary work. And Sister Snow and I were definitely judging the elders for this service project they were involved with, because to us it looked like this was super against the rules. It was not only, like, a regular place where they were not interacting with people, like the general public. They were just in this they were in this animal sanctuary place that was big and kind of spread out, and they were split up from each other. They were just going off wherever without each other, and that's like the biggest rule, is you cannot go anywhere without you have to be within sight and sound of each other. You cannot be separated from each other. That's, like, where shenanigans go down. We knew that, and I guess there was a pretty woman who worked there, and Sister Snow poetically said, "Elder Bueller is alone with a woman in the bungalow." Like, it sounds so silly now, and I kind of laugh talking about it, but after that, we were laughing and freaking out because we didn't know what else to do, because our minds were breaking, because this was so forbidden, this was so bad, this was so dangerous. And yeah, Sister Snow, I remember her being like, danger, 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 in the car, and that was referring to how this just one short 1 or 2 hour experience had kept resulting in times where she was alone with the elders, and I guess she was feeling tempted about being with young men, and she said that her hanging out with elders is like a crack addict hanging around cocaine. Which, I mean, it's what she said, and I wrote it down, and it's, I think, if anything, it gets the point across how worried we were about this. And, of course, we're like, okay, we're going to read Lock Your Heart, which is a talk I have talked about already, and it looks like it helps serve its function, right? helped reinforce that we needed to not have any romantic feelings or whatever about the elders. I don't remember being particularly interested in these two elders, but I guess, I don't know. Sister Snow was very worried. And, I knew that out of principle, this was all forbidden, and I was worried about that. I was worried about those rules being broken. Right? So yeah, of course, we took it upon ourselves, like, okay, these elders, they've lost the plot. And we are women, and we are guardians of virtue. So, like, we're going to call them out on this. So we did literally call them. And then, of course, I chickened out, and I was like, Sister Snow, you have to talk to them. I can't remember if I told her that before the call, or if I've called them, and then I tried talking to them, and then cowardly made her take over the conversation. My guess is that's what I did. But yeah, we did it. We called them out. We told them that we shouldn't keep going there because we were worried they were gonna get in trouble. Anyway, I was looking forward to Sunday after that. So let's see how Sunday goes. Sunday, July 12th, 2015, mission day 275. Well, I feel a little deja vu about saying this, but I don't think it could get much crazier than we had today. We ended up not having to go to Custer this morning for church. Byron canceled on church. My friend from high school, Jared Chappell, was at Spearfish today. That was a little surprising. We got a picture, which I'll probably put in my email. I guess he got back from his mission last November. In Sunday school, we talked about the Holy Ghost, and I got to testify that although we can't really prepare for everything that comes our way, as long as we have the Spirit with us, we'll be okay. And then I wrote in parentheses and italics, foreshadowing. Also, sometime last week, the Supreme Court legalized gay marriage, so during third hour, all the adults and youth, no primary, met in the chapel to read and discuss materials provided by the First Presidency. All about marriage and family, of course. I'm glad I've been working on memorizing the Family Proclamation. I'm not very worried, personally, although a lot of the senior folks are very upset. Okay, so I'm going to actually pause here because the other stuff that's coming up is also important, and I'll need to talk about it, but what just happened, what I just mentioned is really important, and I want you to have your full attention on this. So so I just mentioned, right, it's at this point it is July 12th, 2015. And so I had kind of forgotten about this, and I had forgotten about the specifics. I knew that just because of my awareness of history, I knew that I was on my mission when gay marriage was legalized in the U.S., but I was like, wow, I don't remember, like, what happened. Like, I don't remember how I felt about it. I don't remember what was said, if anything. So I've been really curious about what I would say in my journal, and I'm glad that I wrote this down. It was interesting to me that I wrote that I'm not very worried about it, although I could tell that a lot of the seniors were very upset, which tracks, because, at this point, although I fully believed, like, what the church taught, about how, like, how they said it was, like, homosexuality was, like, a distraction from the family, and that God's plan was for people to be in straight couple families. Unless I say something different in my journal, from what I remember even when I was a missionary, when this happened, I was like, well, I mean, ideally we can, like, get these gay couples and convince them to join the church and change their ways, but, like, it's okay, like, if they get married and do their own thing, because, like, well, the people who don't want to don't have to. Like, I just wasn't super bothered about it, even though I fully believed all the family proclamation, excuse my language, bullshit. I believed all the homophobic teachings and doctrines, but I still just wasn't so brainwashed to, like, be scared of, like, gay people existing and choosing to get married. Like, I was like, well, I don't think it's what God wants, but, like, I don't think it's something we have to worry about. Like, everything's gonna work out, you know, in the end, all will be made right. God has all power, and if it's not supposed to be this way, then we just don't have to worry about it. But I could tell that a lot of the seniors were really upset. And I mean, I don't want to, like, make excuses for myself, like, paint myself as better than, because I was still a missionary for this organization that was actively harming LGBTQ plus people in the past and in that present and in our present today. But it's interesting to me that even in my, like, deepest Mormon brain time, I was like, I don't know, I'm not worried. It's interesting to me that's interesting to me, right? But what I really want to point out about this was how I wrote that there was a third hour where we all met, they canceled primary, and we read and discussed a letter from the first presidency. And I was like, whoa. When I read this, when I was transcribing my journal, I was like, whoa, special third hour meetings are important. They're not super common, especially if it's not on fifth Sunday, which is normally when these things would happen. If it's just kind of out of the blue because there's a big announcement, like, it's a big deal. And also, it can be kind of a sneaky way for church officials to, like, get all the members on the same page without it being, like, a big public thing. They're like, okay, we're just going to tell everyone in a special meeting in our church meetings, like, what to believe about this political thing that just happened. And it's just part of your normal Sunday experience. Like, I'm like, oh, that's a little sneaky. So I was looking it up, and I was actually able to find the letter. I found a message board, a faithful LDS message board, where people were talking about this letter and how they felt about it, and I'm gonna link that because that's really interesting, how different people were responding to it. And also I found the letter. So I'm not gonna read you the whole letter, but I wanted to read some of it to you so you get educated on what happened about this historically. So first of all, the introduction. So this is from a church newsroom article that's still up. Normally, I didn't even have to use the Wayback Machine, so that's interesting. And this is dated June 29th, 2015. And it says that it's to general authorities, general auxiliary presidencies, and the following leaders in the United States and Canada: Area 70s, Temple, Stake, Mission, and District Presidents, Sees, Bishops, and Branch Presidents. So basically everyone in charge of stuff up to, or from the highest church levels down to wards and stakes is supposed to be getting this letter on June 29th. And here's what it says. Dear brethren and sisters, Enclosed is a statement by the Council of the First Presidency and Quorum of the 12 in response to the recent Supreme Court decision legalizing same-sex marriage in the United States. The statement also pertains to the situation in Canada. Local leaders are asked to meet with all adults, young men, and young women on either July 5th or July 12th in a setting other than sacrament meeting and read to them the entire statement. Also included is background material which may be helpful in answering questions that arise. Stake presidents are asked to see that bishops receive copies of this letter and the enclosures. Sincerely yours, Thomas S. Monson, Henry B. Eyring, Dieter F. Uchtdorf. Okay, so that's like the introduction of the instructions to the people who got this. They're supposed to have a special meeting for adults and the like teens, not the primary kids. And it was supposed to be read July 5th or July 12th. And this is July 12th. So it looks like we got it July 12th. And it's from the First Presidency. And then they give a whole response about what happened. They talk about how marriage between a man and a woman was instituted by God and central to his plan for the well-being of society, etc. They say a family built on marriage of a man and woman is the best setting for God's plan of happiness to thrive. They say sexual relations outside of such a marriage are contrary to the laws of God pertaining to morality, etc., etc. So they're kind of, they're saying, like, we don't think this is right. They say, consistent with our fundamental beliefs, church officers will not employ their ecclesiastical authority to perform marriages between two people of the same sex, and the church does not permit its meeting houses or other properties to be used for ceremonies, receptions, or other activities associated with same-sex marriages. So basically, they kind of make sure that with these changes happening, these legal changes, they want to clarify to members that this doesn't change what they've been teaching. They're not going to change their stance. They're not going to perform, even though gay marriage has been legalized, they're not going to permit that. They're not going to let any church stuff be used for anything associated with a gay wedding. They restate that they believe it's sinful. They do have this cop-out sentence that they say, the gospel of Jesus Christ teaches us to love and treat all people with kindness and civility, even when we disagree. We affirm that those who avail themselves of laws or court rulings authorizing same-sex marriage should not be treated disrespectfully. Indeed, the church has advocated for rights of same-sex couples in matters of hospitalization and medical care, fair housing and employment, and probate, so long as these do not infringe on the integrity of the traditional family or the constitutional rights of churches. So yeah, there's a little bit of like, okay, yeah, we can love the sinner and hate the sin. We need to treat them with kindness. And like, look, even we, the church, we have advocated for gay people's basic rights to not like be stripped just because they're gay and in a same-sex relationship is what they call it. They're like, look, we think gay couples should have medical care and housing and employment. And I'm like, yeah, okay, that's probably literally the lowest the bar can be. But I guess it's good that they at least said that, because there are people who would be more extreme than that in the congregation, I'm sure. But they are just, once again, doubling down on, like, okay, it's still okay to disagree with this, and it's not being we're not being bigoted, or just unfairly hateful, or, like, ridiculous. This is just our religion, so, yeah, they can get married, and sure, we'll let them get medical care, but they can't, they're still wrong, and God thinks this is wrong. So I think that's I think that's quite a cop-out. And at this time, I was like, yeah, sure, that works. But now that I have, a bit more of a backbone and I'm a little more willing to be critical of the church, I see some flaws in this discourse. I also, I'm not, I don't want to read the whole thing, but one of the things that was interesting about the further, additional materials that they have, reminded me of a point of determining whether a group is an unhealthy group or a healthy group, or, you can think of it as, ways that you can see if a group is like a cult, if you like that word or not. And I apologize, I tried to find where I heard this or found it, and I just couldn't find it, so I can't give credit to whoever said this, but a point was made recently that a way to know if a group is a dangerous group or a cult is if they say that they are above the law, or the teachings of their leader, or just the group practices if they're above the law. And that's I remember it because it stuck in my mind, because I was like, oh, that makes sense, and it was a different model than what I've had learned from the bite model or other harmful group models of coercive control. And that was on my mind. This was freshly in my mind when I was then reading this statement. So just to remind you, I had recently learned that one way to know if a group you're in is a dangerous group, perhaps even a cult, is if they say that their doctrine or their teachings or their rules are above the law. And then here is what the church, in an official statement, told their church members when gay marriage was legalized in the U.S. So here's what it says. Quote, "For much of human history, civil laws have generally been compatible with God's laws. Unfortunately, there have been notable exceptions to that pattern." And then they give some examples about, they think abortion should not be legal because they think it's not morally acceptable for God. They quote their handbook. They say alcohol should not be legal, or at least it's against, God's laws. And then they continue, so too with issues of unchaste sexual behavior, whether it be heterosexual or homosexual in its orientation. As the first presidency has previously said, and as this current response affirms, changes in the civil law do not, indeed cannot, change the moral law that God has established. God expects us to uphold and keep his commandments regardless of divergent opinions or trends in society. Okay, so yeah, this really stood out to me because I was like, oh yeah, I remember learning in the Articles of Faith that I had to memorize to pass off the I can't even remember what it was called. It was kind of like the Young Women's Program, but it was for primary. And part of it was memorizing the Articles of Faith and then saying them to someone. Anyway, I remember learning that one of the beliefs of the church is that we believe in obeying and honoring and sustaining the law. But then there's also, the church also teaches this. They from the first presidency, they're saying, well, civil laws are generally compatible with God's laws, but they aren't always. And God's laws are always the higher moral law. And And conveniently for the church, they're speaking for God. So whatever their doctrines, policies, or practices are, then these are considered by the group to be the higher law than whatever is the accepted civil law at the time. And I, of course, don't want to make the argument that all federal or state or whatever government laws are perfectly moral. But I do want to point out that if there is a group that says, we say that we believe in obeying, honoring, and sustaining the law, except also we actually don't if the laws are against what we think God's laws are. So we're going to have our own separate law requirements. Like, we have our own interpretations of what. I'm sorry, I'm struggling to like put this to words. This seems like a really clear example to me of how a group can have a dangerous normalization of saying, at least in some ways, saying that, like, yeah, we are fellow citizens, we believe we are going to follow the same rules that everyone else in society is agreeing to follow, when in reality they actually have their own special rules that they're actually following. And this is particularly a problem within Mormonism because, well, for one, I was so affected by this just in my own experience growing up. So, it really kind of messed with me for a long time. But aside from that, the church is so powerful in the state of Utah that, like, the church and state get really muddy, and it's really not good. And even though I can't find the source that pointed out that saying that your group's rules are above the law, I can see how that really rings with me, and I see how that's really dangerous. Like, if I can just give you one example, it's an extreme example, but I think it makes the point clear. If you're in a group that says, well, normally, like, murder is bad, but because we are led by God, and God, through this leader, is telling us we need to, like, murder people, so, for normal people outside of our group, sure, they shouldn't murder, but because we have this special rule, we're gonna do this, and we're still good moral people. Right? And I know that that's kind of an extreme example, but that way of thinking was so common to my experience. Like, just in this example, it's like, okay, well, I guess public has this, what they call a trend of wanting to give the rights and protections of marriage to more people, but actually we want to preserve our right to not let people who are involved with us have any of this. So even though gay marriage was legalized in 2015, if you were a Mormon in Utah, or really anywhere, but if you were a Mormon in Utah and gay marriage was legalized, you could then get married, but you would have no support from your community. They still, as of like the last general conference, I think, or I don't know, there's still high up church leaders, possibly even the prophet, telling people that, like, if you have kids who are gay and they're in a relationship with someone, or even if they're married, like, if they come to see your family, you shouldn't let them stay the night. Like, maybe they can come for an hour or two, but they can't stay the night, because you can't give the appearance of evil. You can't give the appearance of accepting their sin, right? Which is just, to me, that's not actually good for families. That's just good for the church, and the church maintaining its power and control over people. So, I highly recommend going and reading this statement. It's not very long, but it's very eye-opening, and it gives you a really good idea of the kind of tactics and strategies that the LDS Church has used and continues to use to pretend that they are not being bigoted and unnecessarily hateful against the queer community, when in fact they are, and they're just hiding behind legalese. So please read that. And if you yourself are, if you still believe that gay marriage or someone experiencing a homosexual life experience, or a gender divergent, transgender, non-binary experience, etc. If you personally think that's wrong, I want you to take a second to really think about who told you that that was wrong, and why did they tell you that that was wrong? What do people have to gain by you hating or being afraid of, or wanting to take away the rights and ultimately the human deserved needs of these people? Why do people want you to see other people as less deserving than you, right? I think that if you really sit with it, you will find that there's really not a good argument. At least that's the conclusion I came to. And also, if you are a part of the LGBTQ plus community, my heart goes out to you for what it's worth. I know it's a scary time right now. It sucks. And I hope everything works out, and it sucks that even if eventually things do work out, there are still a lot of people right now who are being really hurt, and you might be one of them, and it sucks, and I'm sorry that you have to go through this, that we as a shared human society, that we have to go through this. It's just, can we just be done with this? Okay, so I'm going to go back to my journal now, and it's a pretty big change of topics, so that chapter is closed. Going back to the journal. After church, we did a grilled cheese lunch and nap. All our appointments fell through, so we got to do the full 2 hours of personal and companionship study. We then picked up Sydney and went to the Hydes' home for supper. Our message was on Psalm 23 and John 14:27, focusing on the line, "He leadeth me beside the still waters." Once again, I bore my testimony that when Christ is with us, and he is always with us, although the waters may seem to be raging around us, he will make it be still. We sang, "The Lord is my shepherd," and I felt very, very comforted. We left to go read Preach My Gospel with Sydney at the church. While backing the car, Sister Snow noticed a black car and, of course, thought nothing of it. Then when we pulled off the road to the church parking lot, I noticed a black car pull ahead and then stop a ways up. When we were out on the sidewalk, I started to get a feeling that something big was coming. It was almost like the time we saw the tornado clouds forming in Custer. I told Sydney and Sister Snow what I was feeling, and then we went into the church. With each step we took, I felt more and more uneasy. We sat down in the pews, and I was feeling super uneasy, and Sister Snow started to feel it too. It was weird that we were feeling so off at the church. We said a prayer to know what we needed to do, during which the sinking feeling got deeper and more urgent. After saying amen, we all looked up at each other, and Sister Snow said, "We need to leave," which I was definitely getting. We jumped up and hurried to the glass doors, which were thankfully locked. Where we were parked out, aka where we were all huddled together, looking out at the parking lot through the glass doors at the entryway, we all saw that same black car with the luggage rack now parked in the church parking lot. Instant recognition and dread flooded my mind, and I knew we needed to get away. We ran without speaking into the Jeep, and I sped out of the parking lot towards the interstate entrance. I last remember seeing their brake lights come on, and Sydney, looking out the back, saw them follow us onto the freeway. Yes, we were freaking out. We decided to go to the Stockmans, so we were on the way to Rapid. We called President Stockman, but he said no one was home, so we should try President Lawrence's. I pulled off an exit, but felt like we should not go back to Spearfish. We prayed again, then decided we'd just go to Rapid City. So we called Elder Parks, our district leader, then the zone leaders, and the sister training leader, sisters, both of whom didn't answer. President Partridge was cheerful yet serious. He commended us for our action and gave us permission to go. So we went, singing hymns, praying, myself giggling out of discomfort. President Stockman was actually already in Rapid to see Ellen Hopwood at the hospital, so he invited us to come over and meet him in the parking lot. We did, and he listened concerned as we told him the whole story. He told us to keep him aware of our plans. Then he went to his daughter's home to pick up Annette, while we three went into the ICU to see Ellen. We had to phone in at the doors on the 5th floor of the hospital, but they let us missionaries in, and we brought Sydney along. Ellen is on a breathing and feeding tube. I think her pneumonia took a turn for the worse. She was rushed to Rapid just earlier today. She was in so much pain, and she was frustrated not being able to talk. We held her hand, sang a hymn, 112, almost at a whisper, and had just read an Ensign article from Sydney's phone when Elder Dublin and Elder Millard arrived to give her a blessing. She was promised, even commanded, to have a full recovery of health. Smiley face. We all left her after that. We did see a rainbow out her tall window. Back in the parking lot, we'd missed calls from everyone, so we got back in contact. President Stockman picked Sydney up to take her home, just in case we'd stay in Rapid. The zone leaders were glad we were okay. Before calling Sister Harris, we decided we'd just go back to Spearfish, said a prayer, and started driving. But while we were informing her of our plan, we both felt we'd actually better stay in Rapid, so we instead drove to the sister's apartment. President Partridge, when we called him back, said that was a good idea. So without purse or script or journal, I'm transcribing from borrowed notebook paper, we stayed in Rapid. Here we be. Bed sounds nice. I'm feeling the Lord with me today, even as the waters raged around us. I'm also very grateful that I am with Sister Snow, and I'm very grateful for our obedience to the handbook that keeps us safe and guided by the Spirit. All right. So, scary moment. I don't think I've really explained the situation in the spearfish area. And I don't think I've explained why we were like not staying there. Basically, there's a big giant event that happens in the area that the town is normally like, a small town. And then on for like a week, like 1 million people come there, and it's like kind of wild. Which is, can be fun, but also it was considered like a dangerous environment for sister missionaries. And I think some of that was exaggeration, but I think there was some truth to that, especially since sister missionaries are young and probably a little naive. At least I was, right? So we normally were just not even in the area. We would go to our other town that was, still affected by this big event, but, it wasn't the hubbub. But we were there for just a little bit, right? And anyway, when we were looking back on what happened together, we figured there was probably someone who was not normally there, and they were just there for the event, and they probably just, best case scenario, thought it would be fun to stalk sister missionaries, and they were just like doing a mean prank. And it was still really scary. I didn't make the connection, but Sister Snow had recognized the car from the previous place we had just been, and they had followed us to like the empty church. And yeah, so, best case scenario, it was just someone being a jerk, getting off on like making people feel scared and intimidated. And worst case scenario, it's easy to imagine worse scenarios than that, right? Fortunately, like, we noticed, and while we didn't call the police, which was too bad, we did at least like get ourselves out of the situation the best we could, and it turned out okay. But it was scary, right? I think just looking back on this, you can see how I have this, just generally when I'm writing in my journal, I have this sort of goal or scheme of showing God's hand in everything and seeing how there's like, it's all one big grand story, and the good triumphs and God takes care of you. So I was always trying to show kind of that theme in my day, and it was easy to pick that out in this day because we talked about how sometimes it's scary in the world around you, but Jesus is with you and he'll protect you. And then this thing happened, and it just like served to reinforce my belief that we were protected by God, God protected us, especially because we were obedient to the White Handbook, and we were thus, we were obedient enough. We were worthy of the Spirit. We were worthy of God's guidance and protection. That's really what my takeaway was. Of course, now my understanding of that is a little different. I think, or I choose not to believe, and I really can't believe that a God will protect me because I followed some slightly arbitrary rules but wouldn't protect someone else. That doesn't check with me. I don't believe that anymore. Now, kind of how I see this is, while we were getting pretty delusional in some ways, we still had our basic human instincts, and we were all picking up different things, and it wasn't like the Spirit, it was just our like innate human sense of there is danger and you need to take care of yourself. And fortunately, we were able to do what we needed to do to be generally safe, right? Another thing I really wanted to point out about this was I did not tell my parents that this happened. I didn't want them to be worried about me, and I was like, they don't need to know because there's nothing they could do now anyway, and then they'll just be freaked out. And that was partially because of, I think, just knowing my parents' temperament. I was like worried about stressing them out. But also, really, there is the emphasis on making sure the church looks good. And I was like, I mean, it's not good publicity for the church if I send out an email or if I tell people that the missionaries were like getting stalked, and this is like the second time this has happened now, so I'm just not gonna say anything, right? That's like kind of what my thinking would have been. Just like keep it under the wraps. People don't need to know about it. We got the help from our leaders that we needed, and that's all. Like, no more discussion. That's it. Which is, I think, a very prevalent attitude towards sort of anything happening in Mormon culture, in my opinion. I did want to point out that President Partridge, he was our new mission president, right? And I can't even remember, had I even met him yet? I'm not sure if I had, but he reacted so differently to how President Allen had reacted. I don't know if you remember, but the last time something like this happened, and the other time it seemed way less serious because it was just like a guy following us in town. Like, he wasn't driving around. He was just kind of like uncomfortably following us in one building, right? Versus this was someone who was like driving around following us. But the first time it happened and we told our mission president, he's like, oh, it's not a big deal. You sisters are safe. Like, just remember you're safe. And even when I stayed in the area and I got Sister Snow to train, he was like, hey, make sure you tell Sister Snow that she's safe, and like reinforced her that this is a safe area with the understood implication. Understood instruction was don't tell her about that incident of like the stalking thing, because you don't need to needlessly scare her because nothing happened and you're fine. And like, if you tell her, you're just being mean, right? And that's not a good way to deal with it. And I'm really glad that President Partridge dealt with it differently. When we called him, maybe he was like, this sounds like it could be, maybe you all just saw something and it wasn't anything at all. But he didn't even take a minute to be like, are you sure this is what happened? He just knew that in that moment, whatever was actually happening, we were scared and we were reaching out to him because we didn't know what to do. And he said, yes, you sisters, you're being smart. It's definitely good to be cautious. It's good to take care of your safety. I'm glad you did that. Good job. Yes, you should go to see your sister training leaders and go to a different area where you feel safe. Like, that is such a good response. Of course, it would have been better probably if he had also been like, hey, you should maybe contact the law enforcement, and like, do you by chance remember the license plate on the car or any more details like the brand or anything? He didn't do that. So maybe if I was giving him like an employee feedback thing and be like, okay, here's what you did well, here's how I would like to see improvement, right? But at least he did the bare minimum of making sure we felt safe and validating that we needed to feel safe, and that if we felt scared, like, we should do something about it, right? Yeah. This has been pretty long. So I guess I'm going to end it there. Woohoo! Things just keep escalating. And that's my 41st week as a Mormon sister missionary. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast if you want to continue following my story. Please rate and review this episode, and please share this with anyone you think would be interested. I hope you have a great week, and if you want my advice, just remember that you can love others best when you love yourself first. Bye.